So, how do we understand like what things are the same and what things are different? It's a very vague question, but we can kind of flesh it out as we go along.
How things are the same and how they're different?
Yeah, like how do we categorize things? How do we know which things are in some one category and which things are another? Like, let's just start with like the phenomenological world. Like how do we know that this is a tree and it's separate from, the brick behind it?
I'd say the basic gist of an answer I can give you is symbolism, which kind of ties into that philosophy of language.
Yeah.
I mean, you can even break it down to say that like symbolism is language and language is symbolism. Just because it's kind of how we derive as people, I think. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
We use symbolism for everything. I mean, probably before language, there was, cave paintings and things of that nature. So,
okay.
If that kind of relates.
Yeah. So there's a kind of symbolism that is related to this, like the primordial elements of life.
I would say.
And then you build from there, kind of.
Yeah. At least fundamentally, if you're like, I don't know, put on the planet and you don't have any idea of what a tree is, it's like, okay, you might have a different word for it, but symbolically, if I drew a tree and you've seen a tree, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I don't know, from a ground up, I feel like it's hard because I can look at the modern world and be like, okay, symbolism everywhere,
Yeah.
Even invisible symbolism that society abides by. Common sense, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
Like, how do you explain common sense to somebody that doesn't get it?
Like a normativity.
It's like, that's kind of the best way I would describe it.
Yeah, and I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, no, you're good. Yeah, you're good. You're
Put
good.
on the spot. So, like, there's these cultural symbols that are underneath society, is what I'm hearing. And is there a sort of innate symbology, if you will, of like how we perceive things from our birth? Or is it all just kind of societally trained?
I could argue that it is cultural in some sense. If you grow up in Southeast Asia, odds are you're going to grow up Hindu or Buddhist.
Yeah.
If you're born in America, odds are you're going to grow up Christian or something of that nature. I know there's lots of mixed religions in America, but like if you grow up in the Southern Bible Belt like I did, you're going to grow up Christian. At least with that kind of mindset of like, okay, this is the framework of the world.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's like what I was taught. And so that is kind of my background in how I understand the world and how. But I think it is cultural, I think.
So in that sense, like if I could go down that trail, do you think the religious context or societal context that you were raised in affects like your perception as such? Like you literally see certain things and not others because of that?
100%, I would say that.
Okay.
I don't want to like stab religion, you know what I mean? Because it has its place. But,
sure.
I grew up Southern Baptist, and it was a pretty hateful church. And that did affect my view on a lot of things, like, even just the world, I kind of viewed as like, temporary,
Yeah.
temporary. Why should I care about environmental conservation when this isn't even our home kind of thing?
Yeah.
Is kind of how that shaped my psychology. And like for the longest time you couldn't get me to like all other religions were wrong. I didn't know anything about them. They were wrong.
Yeah.
And I knew that. And so that kind of shaped how I view people too. Like it almost set up a complex. I was like, yeah, these people that aren't thinking the way I do are, I don't want to say less than, because that's kind of what they instilled in me, is that they were less than, but
So someone that adopts a sort of religious point of view has a naive perspective on the world?
I wouldn't say naive, but I could say it could lead you to become closed off. Yeah.
Okay. So what does the correct perspective look like?
Well,
like what is the opposite of...
Wouldn't we all like to know?
That's a good...
What's the correct perspective we're supposed to have?
Yeah, fair enough, man.
I'm a firm believer that it's different for everyone, you know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't have one philosophy that I follow.
Yeah.
I left the church at like 18, joined the Marines, and that kind of brought me out into the world that is different. You know, like for the first time, like I go to Japan and I'm seeing people worship the Buddha like they do Jesus, and like that's their culture, is like how we view it in the South, how we view Jesus. That's how they view their religion too. And it's like it kind of got the gears turning, like different, just I guess different perspectives on everything, life, I guess you could say.
Okay, so would you say you subscribe to a kind of pluralism in the sense that there's like many different ways to come to a coherent form of...
Yeah, I'd say so. Many ways to skin a cat, so to speak.
Sure. Like in that pluralist mindset, not that I'm trying to pin you down exactly, but would you say that there are worldviews that are wrong? And like fall outside of that pluralism of those that are somewhat valid, if you will?
It's hard to say a worldview is wrong. I mean, we can look at like history and be like, okay, you know, this is wrong and that's wrong, and widespread society views that as wrong.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the invisible institutions I talk about. Like you can kill somebody. That's kind of extreme. But you can murder somebody and like nothing cosmically is going to stop you. If, you know, you'll have repercussions of like the law. But I don't know. It's hard to say like, obviously like me, in my opinion, I'm like, these are things that aren't right.
Yeah.
But who's to say that I'm right? You know what I mean?
You wouldn't think that there's a sort of universal conscience that would affect someone if they killed another person, like unjustly? Or
personally, and now this is like, it's not objective, this is just belief.
Yeah.
I do, you know, just because I've seen a lot of like, just recently I saw this news story of a lady who got in a car accident and then got taken to jail because she had a dead body in the back of her car. It's like, what are the odds? You know what I mean? I don't know, weird cataclysmic events that just feel like divine timing or coincidences, some people say. But
So would you not be willing to take the step of saying like cultures, for example, that glorify like murder or dehumanization are wrong worldviews? Or would you say that you just think they're wrong, but you can't say they're like objective?
I could say that they do things that I perceive as wrong, but like there's a tribe in India that worships Shiva, and part of their ritualistic is consensual cannibalism.
Yeah.
And they believe that nothing can separate you from the divine, not even, you know, killing and eating people. That's one of the extremes in the world.
Sure.
But who am I to say, you know, you're doing it consensually, however that process may be.
But would anybody ever consent to being killed and eaten though?
They have people in their tribe, yeah, that I'm not super 100% on how they do it, but I do know that they get members that have passed instead of like sacrifice kind of thing.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, they're not going, from what I understand, they're not going out and just killing people.
Yeah. Okay. So, does anything go?
I'm going to say no, because I'm not a subjective moralist. I do lean towards an objective universal truth. Do I know what that is? No.
Okay, sure.
Do I think that there is something? Yeah. I can't prove it. Obviously, as with lots of beliefs, like I can't prove it, I can't disprove it. So it's unanswerable things.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I'm not. I do think there is right and wrong. I think a lot of what leans us that way is society's understanding of these problems.
Yeah.
Like, even biblically, there's slavery, chattel slavery. In America, we had that up until like 300 years ago, 400 years ago. And now we know, as a society, like, we don't do that.
Yeah.
For the most part.
So I guess I would try to circle this back into the first question I asked, because it is related in the sense of we're trying to reach for some kind of universal morality that seems to be vaguely there, but you're not for sure if it can have any sort of objective claim. It's just your perspective, something like that.
I don't think.
But so this great unity that we're like trying to figure out. How do we? I'm trying to figure out how to loop this into the first question. Like, how do we differentiate it?
Differentiating things
between the grand unity and maybe the more specific ways it manifests itself. Does that make any sense?
It's tough. I would say maybe. I don't know if I have an answer to that one. I think the closest I might be able to give you is, from my personal understanding, what if it's one and the same? You know what I mean? Does it particularly matter if we know the fundamental what makes, I'm going back to trees because they're all here, that's what I'm looking at, but does it matter if we know what makes it up, if that makes sense, or is a tree, whether you call it a tree, whether you have a symbol for it?
Yeah. Is there something about it that has ontology that you don't kind of...
I think in its own right, like, kind of that old joke of like, when a tree falls in the woods, do you hear it? You know, it's like, it has its own innate nature, I guess. You don't need to be around.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be identified for it to just exist. And I think it's kind of, at least right now, where we're at.
Yeah.
I think that goes for like the observable universe, and even the unobservable and unknown. It's like, we might not have the answers right now, but that doesn't change anything about what's going on, what will continue to go on, what things are. It doesn't change the state, I would say, but I am excited to see where we go in the future. If somebody in my lifetime can definitively, objectively prove the existence of a God, that'd be cool.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
This is a weird question, just based on this unity thing. Like, are we all the same being, like just the illusion of difference?
You know, I've heard that. You know, we're all just the divine playing itself, right?
Sure.
And that's a fun one to digest. I think it's certainly possible. Okay. I don't think you could prove that to me objectively. Like, I don't think you'd be able to be like, okay, here's some proof that's visual or audio or, you know, just written down historically or, you know,
record something
observable. You know, it's like, okay, I don't think we're gonna have that per se, but it's fun to think about. And there's definitely some things that, you know, whether that part is true or not, you can definitely, at least from my belief, feel that you know, we're all on this planet together, you know what I mean? And so whether that's true or not, we are essentially one species that's trying to do its best. And so whether that's divinely connected or not, I don't want to say it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't. But it does to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so
I guess there seems to be a lot of question about proof and how to know something is true. So how do we know how do we know things are true?
Honestly, coming from a science degree, I like to tell you scientific method and observation.
Yeah.
But even that can lead you astray. You know, we allow for, I think, 0.5% of error for a study to be true. Yeah. Which still allows that little room for error, which is, when you think like little, you know, like a study of like insects or something, entomology, it's like, you can get the gist of the data. Yeah. But if you're thinking larger cosmically philosophy, it's like how do we do the scientific method?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
So there seems to be things that escape the scientific methods.
I would say,
grasp.
yeah, at least right now, yeah.
So
And it's not like an end-all be-all. I think
So
someone will come up with another system. And
yeah, can
go
we
off of
can
that.
we rely on some kind of system of logic to decode our philosophical propositions, or is that a fool's errand?
No, I don't think it's a fool's errand, but I do think you have to be careful. And I think with philosophy, the smarter you are, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah.
Is a good mindset to have in philosophy of like, okay, I don't know, and I'm okay with that. Let's start delving into how do we figure that out. And in my opinion, with like philosophy, it's like a lot of chiefs,
Yeah.
not a lot of, everyone wants to be right.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm okay with being wrong. I've been wrong my whole life about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like, it doesn't,
But do you think you're right about anything?
man, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Do I think I'm right about anything? I know I'm here. I know you're here for the most part. My brain could be lying to me, you know. But that I don't know either.
Is
you
it-
know? I like to,
When you go down to a certain I think therefore I am.
I would say, I think, therefore I am, I think.
Okay.
You know?
So even that Descartes.
I just,
thing,
yeah.
Like that. Even that isn't.
No, yeah. I'd say if I myself can't prove it myself, whether that be through doing the research or secondary research,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna make a claim.
Okay.
And that's just me. I'm not gonna make a claim.
So is the chief virtue open-mindedness then? To just be fully open to anything that could be possibly
Well,
true?
I would say, again, I'm not gonna take a stance to say that that's the right way, because I know that there's some people that
Well, in an
it wouldn't work
open-minded
for them.
way.
Yeah,
What-
I would say,
Yeah.
just on a general basis of like how society thinks murder is wrong, but then you
Yeah.
have those individuals that do it
Yeah.
in the same way that, yes, will there be individuals out there that think no and probably have a different way? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Sure.
But I would say being more open-minded and understanding, especially if you are like myself and you grew up in a very one-track kind of upbringing, you know what I mean? Be
So-
open-minded. I think it'll help you, even in your day-to-day, like it helped me just get
Yeah.
along better with people.
So
Yeah.
open-mindedness is a good epistemological lens.
Yeah, I would
for
say. I mean, even in the Marines, I was closed-minded, man.
Yeah.
I'm one of the last veterans in the global war on terror,
Yeah.
and so a lot of it is like anti-Muslim prejudice, and it's very preached to you like these brown people are bad,
Yeah.
and so even just fighting that kind of mindset that they're trying to instill is like
Yeah.
part of that open-mindedness. It's like,
Okay. So, is it something like trying to take the exception, like the thing that always seems to be an exception to the rule, and almost use that as leverage to kind of have a fully open-minded worldview, like always looking to the exception to sort of undermine any rule that might have a flaw in it, something like that? Like,
Okay.
are you using? Because it seems like every time I try to throw, okay, is this a rule? And you say, well, there's probably an exception.
well, that's
So-
another thing about my thing, and when it comes to rules, that I guess you could tie to this.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes comes from, I don't remember, but he talks about how his mom would instill rules, and he's a Confucius philosopher or something, and he would intentionally break them, and sometimes it led to him being hurt, and so his mom would be like, that's why we have the rule in place, that's why I let you do what you do, so that now you understand.
Yeah.
It was essentially to protect you from harm.
So if rules like that, in a sort of practical sense, protect from harm, like, would philosophical rules, if done correctly, serve a similar purpose?
I'd say it could.
Like the rule of non-contradiction or something like that?
I'd say it could, and I'm going to try to go on a tangent here with how.
Okay.
I would say almost similar to how we have invisible rules in society, like, you know, pedestrians have the right of way, stop at us. Obviously, they're laws, but God's not gonna smite you for running a stop sign. You know what I mean? That's like something that society put in place, and it's like we do it because we want to, for whatever reason. You want to be a good citizen because it's the law, or whatever.
Or the idea, like, if everyone's running stoplights all the time.
Then there's road accidents, right? You don't want to get in an accident. You have a nice car, or you value yourself, you value others. You don't want that thing to happen. I'd say you could apply that in a philosophical lens, but I think where we run into things is, my view on philosophy is I don't think we should ever be stuck. And so if we do find a way to do that, and we come up with these rules to play by, I guess, especially in certain things, like when you argue, monotheism, polytheism, things that right now I'd argue you can't objectively prove or disprove. Mm-hmm. How do you generate the rules? So I guess it would be like, from what we know, like Descartes, things like that, what we know. But St. Thomas Aquinas, you'd have to use that as a rubric, but also.
But it seems like when I tried to figure out what you felt you knew, it seemed like there was nothing you could say you knew for certain.
No, and there's not, and I think I even honestly think that it's hard with philosophy, man.
Yeah.
Just because you can have it from the old ones who have gone before, but a lot of the times, like from philosophy, a lot of times what we sit there is we pick it apart. And so it's like, if we're just sitting here picking apart previous philosophers while also learning from them, I would say, similar to just how we do in society, that's where the rules should come from. There needs to be like a consensus among our leading philosophers.
Like, we can't just tear down all the theories.
No. I would say my biggest issue in philosophy would be just that I'm right attitude and not getting stuck, not being stagnant. I think because it's different from like a science that you can measure, it leads to an endless amount of possibilities that we do need to have that open mindset to continue, I guess. I don't know.
Is this related? Tell me what your understanding is more related to. Is it more related to always focusing on the exception in order to try to see if the rule has imperfections and if we could find a different rule? Or is it more related to focusing on the whole instead of the parts?
So, for me, myself, I would say it's more related to the whole. I try to go about day to day, and I think to myself, how, as cliche as it is, it's like, how can I change the world today? You know what I mean? I'm not I wouldn't classify myself as a good person. But, if there's a homeless man and I could feed him, why not, If there's an old lady who needs help, why not?
So you think you try to pay more attention to the whole and not the sort of chaotic parts that might be disjunct?
I would say so. I like to live by the motto that everything's fine until it's not.
Okay, sure.
Just to relieve anxieties about things that I don't know.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But as far as that goes, philosophically, I follow a lot of Buddhism. So a lot of if you improve the self, you can improve others. But you cannot improve others if you don't improve yourself. And so I like to focus a lot on myself, what I can change. People can have theories and stuff, and if it's not, I don't know, if it's not affecting my beliefs, my striving to become better, I leave it. You know what I mean? I leave it and take it with a grain of salt. Take what you need from it. That's just kind of how I go about it. I don't try to focus too much on. That's not for me. You know what I mean? That's not my purpose.
maybe the whole is not trying to create this systemized philosophy where everything sort of fits into each other perfectly and you can explain the world perfectly, but the whole is more like a transformation of self?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say if everybody can transform themselves into the best version of themselves, which is hypocritical because I know I'm not the best version of myself.
Yeah.
But if we could, right, theoretically, if we all could, like, we're all the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
I'd love to see where that possibility leads, but that's not the reality.
So if you could pick between two descriptions of reality, one being reality as a place of things and the other being reality as a forum of action, like which one would you choose?
What do you mean by forum of action?
Like say a set of agents that are acting in particular ways according to their agency.
So almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, but almost like the cause and effect of, like, there's always cause and effect for everything.
Well, the cause and effect might be more related to a place of things in which everything has a sort of mechanistic causality that is, if it could be understood by the, systems of physics and math, then we could maybe even find out that it's determined and predict it. Or a form of action where it's intrinsically unpredictable because each agent could make any particular choice at a given time.
I'm going to say the first one.
Okay.
Just because I do subscribe more to the cause and effect theory that everything is derivative of cause and effect, which negates free will, negates the free will argument to an extent. Yeah. I don't fully think it negates free will.
How does that not contradict with the whole transformation of self idea that is supposed to be the bigger picture here?
I would say because it falls into the patterns of what we have now. Like, for me to be my better self, I guess, you have to have an understanding of, like, what that means. Because if I don't know what I'm striving to be better for or to...
But isn't your entire path just determined by the mechanistic laws of physics? Like how can you...
I'm no physicist.
Okay, well then if it's not physics, then something else, I guess. But, like, how do we reconcile something being determined and free will thus being negated? And it's a similar question as I just asked, but I'm just trying to figure it out. And then reconcile that with making active choices to transform oneself. Like, do you even make those choices, or are they just kind of made for you? And
so kind of how I see it is not like, I don't see it as predetermined cause and effect per se. Like, this happened, and so now you're on this route. I see it as more of your actions have the cause and effect, and you have your choice in determining the actions. But
so it's not necessarily determined.
I think you are the determining factor.
So you do have free will.
In a way, I guess. The reason why I don't like using free will is because I tie it a lot to Christianity.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And I would say free will in that sense, but I don't think free will like determinism, if that makes sense.
So maybe you do believe in free will. You just don't want it. You don't want it in a religious context.
Yeah, but I guess and it's. I think I think it's random. Like I didn't pick to be born in America. Yeah. And the series that bring you here are random. I think being here is random.
Okay.
I mean, there is a sanctity to life that I have.
But there's something about it, based on the choices that you make, that makes it somewhat not random and dependent on your choice. Is that true?
I would have to say, I would have to say that at any given time, you're in a moment where your choices are going to determine the next cause and effect.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think you have the ability to make that choice in the sense of free will that people would describe. I don't think there's like a predisposition, like, okay, God knows your whole life plan that like a Christian would appreciate. I don't think it's like that. I think it's like, okay, it's kind of like with the laws, like there's natural laws, and it's like, okay, we know we can't jump through a wall. You know what I mean? Yeah. But like there's things that happen to us on a day-to-day basis that could be construed as random that I believe are the cause and effect of your choices.
And so in that case, if we go back to one of the previous questions, would you say, since we do have a choice in the matter, if we construe the world right now and look around do we see a place of things that are acting deterministically, or do we see a forum of agents that are acting in particular ways that they choose, or maybe it's some amalgamation of both?
God, I feel like it's in the middle.
Okay, yeah.
Like, I feel like both have an effect on what we would call this reality, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's necessarily the conclusion there, because you can't really say it's one or the other, I would say.
I agree with you on that, yeah. I would say that's a good place, and I don't know if you have the time, but I might need to get going for a doctor's appointment.
You can leave whenever you want.
Yeah. Just,
really
but it was really good talking to you.
I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I
get
hope
to share a lot often, but
it
was good. It was good thinking.
Yeah.
Good thinking.
And this is kind of what I've been doing, just because of the spirit of the show. What is a question you think you should be wrestling with today?
What is a question I should be wrestling with today? It's the question we all wrestle with. What are we doing here? Is there a purpose?
Sure, the question
that's
we sort of touched on.
Yeah. Is there a purpose? Is there a reason for us being here?
And if there is a purpose, how do we attain that purpose?
Yeah, how do we go about determining what it is?
The methodological question, too, yeah.
The methodological, and also, or is it all random, you know? And if it's that case, you know, don't be a nihilist.
Sure.
That's no fun, even if it is random and there is no purpose. You can just have fun with it.
And if you want to get back on the show, we can talk about that.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.